a bit of warning. When you're hearing somebody pitching their framework, you should be asking what this guy is trying to sell to you. In this case, you are quite safe. This is Apache license, so it's fully free for any kind of things that you are building. So, we are building on top of 3 ideas. The first one, that everything is a component. We have rich components for user interface, for data sources, for themes. So let's get started with user interface side. One way of kind of starting to look into Vaadin is to see sample demo. So it's basically demo where you can choose a component from the core framework, try it out, view the source code, and learn how it's used. So this is quite trivial. Go to vaadin.com/demo to try it out. The core components are in there. But we are now in process of building Vaadin 7. It's in beta at the moment, and we are kind of recreating this whole sampler thing. So this is something that nobody has seen yet, and it's still under development. So this is the new sampler. So we could kind of fly through the components and choose one of these, and then start kind of finding some interesting component. Let's see if I have any interesting components here. Let's take something more simple, like a button. And then we could just start modifying the properties of the button and experiment how this kind of changes. This is not released yet, but it will be released in a couple of weeks or so. So this is mostly built for building rich web user experiences. So here is another demo that we hasn't released yet. This is also work under construction. So you can do things like, let's say, have some data about showing a huge data sets. You could kind of scale them like and scroll through, let's say, 1 million points in a timeline. Or it's quite typical to have like huge amount of data in table on Vaadin. For example, in this case, there are 5,000 lines in this table, and while I'm scrolling, loading it from the server side automatically. And doing things like filtering by some text is just kind of really transparent. You could do things like drag and drop. Let's create a new report here. So let's just drag things here or edit things. So this is kind of how Vaadin applications feel. So this is mostly for building applications that are like desktop-like. But you can build web type of application as well. But if you're building a website, like page-oriented application, this is probably not the framework for you. You can also build mobile applications. And I think that one of the most interesting things is the directory of add-on components. So there are tons and tons of add-on components. You can just pick and choose one, see what it looks like, how to use it, integrate it with your applications, or cut and paste a Maven form definition, or download the library. So that was about UI components. Themes, there are a bunch of default themes, like boring business type of application themes, a bit more like webby themes, more custom themes where you can just choose the colors for them, or like fully customized themes. So this is just something like, I think, 300 lines of Java code and then some custom CSS on top of the default components. The layouts are reactive and all kind of layout calculations are automatic here. We also, with Vaadin 7, we have added SAS theming, a SAS theme compiler within Vaadin, and basically we had to re-implement SAS from scratch in Java in order to merge that with the product. So third thing, data sources. We have really simple data model. So basically there are properties, so these are single things, items basically back of those properties, and containers like back of those items, like table or some kind of set of objects. You can use these by just implementing these interfaces, and if you have more kind of extra things that you want to have in your data source, you can just implement some additional interfaces. But there are also like many ready-made implementations of these available. So that was the first idea about components. The second idea is that we have merged server and client development models in quite a unique way. So let's first take a look at abstraction layer for a web app. So basically you have a backend server, you have a web server, then there is some kind of communication mechanism between the client and the server. On the client side, you are basically building things with JavaScript, and in case of Google Web Toolkit, you can compile Java to JavaScript. So Google Web Toolkit basically requires you to implement these 4 layers in order to build your application. And then you can add some native JavaScript by hand. With Vaadin, it's a bit different story. You can do all those layers as well, but you are only required to implement the server side. So you can leave the client side away altogether and still get the user interface. With JavaScript frameworks like XJS, you are also implementing 4 different layers. So what is this Google Web Toolkit and Vaadin thing? For 5 years we have been using Google Web Toolkit, basically as a rendering engine within Vaadin and an extension mechanism within Vaadin. So these have been separate projects. With Vaadin 7, we basically merged Google Web Toolkit within Vaadin product directly. So it's kind of in the same package, and we are taking responsibility for maintaining this, I would say, fork of Google Web Toolkit within Vaadin. But we also want to kind of contribute back, so we keep the mainline GUI and the fork within Vaadin in sync. So this basically means that Vaadin became Google Web Toolkit compatible. So if you're using Google Web Toolkit today, you could use Vaadin instead of Google Web Toolkit and get the same classes, same free features, and then get what is extra in Vaadin, and I'll come to that in a minute. So basically what is extra at the moment is that we have 2 development models. We have a server-side development model, is optimized for productivity, and the client-side development model where we have all the control on what's happening in the web browser. So let me explain that in a bit more closer way. So the architecture of Vaadin, you could see in 3 different layers. So you have browser layer, we have web server layer, and you have kind of backend server layer. And you only have to implement like the UI on the server side and the backend on the backend side. In many cases, you can even run these in the same server. The UI is implemented using UI components on the server side. So these are just plain old Java objects on the server side with Java APIs, things like button and lists and trees and so forth. And there are a set of ready-made components. For those, go to the sampler demo and see what kind of components are around. Add-on components that you saw in the directory, but in most applications you are building your own components as well, and it's pretty simple to do on the server side. Then you can also build components on the client side. So these are just compositions of, when you are doing custom components here, these are just compositions of existing components. When you want to do something totally custom, you can build widgets on the client side, either in Java and compile that to JavaScript within the included compiler, or with JavaScript directly. And then a theme of your own, if none of the existing themes is good enough. But you can also do UIs on the client side, like fully stateless UIs on the client side. So these UIs are stateful and these are stateless. These are good for things like offline mode and that kind of things. What is actually still missing from Vaadin and what we are working on is that we will enable you to use all of these widgets in Vaadin directly from the client side. At the moment, the APIs are not there yet. So within Vaadin 7.1 and 7.2, we add proper client-side APIs for all widgets. At the moment, only part of the widgets are usable from the client side. And then you can also publish services that bring data to these client-side UIs. It should be noted that all of the communication here on this layer, when you are building on the server side, is fully automated. So you don't have to do any coding for the communication layer or for the rendering layer. So let's try it out to see what it is in practice. This will be interesting as I haven't slept too much, and doing live coding is always a big trick. And doing that with the product that is kind of just now coming out and still in beta is even more tricky. Anyways, this is the application that we try to write here. So this is a small note-taking application with a bunch of notes here, reflect editor here, and connect that to a database and see how it goes. The source code is available on GitHub, so you can take a look at that there. But let's try to do that from scratch. So this is actually quite trivial. We only have two meaningful parts here. We are deploying a ready-made servlet, Vaadin servlet, and pointing at that to our UI, DevFest UI. And then we are deploying that to the root of our web application. That's it. We don't have to touch that part at all. The other part is one Java file right here. So this basically just puts hello world on the screen. Quite trivial. So let's run that one first. So we could just, of course, change things here. I'll change this to something else. Go to web browser and refresh, and it refreshes. So the cycle is quite fast. But let's do something completely custom. So we wanted to have this split panel on the screen. So let's create a split panel. Horizontal split panel. Split. And set that as a content for our application. So now we created application with just one component on the screen. And let's start filling that out. So we have this list of nodes here. And we could put that on the screen. Just add it to split panel. Like this. And now we have a list of nodes here, but it's not visible as we don't have any columns. So let's add a column here. Let's say this could be title of string class with the default of empty. So now we have a table here, but it's quite awkwardly small. So let's resize it. Just to take all the space given by the layout for it. So all this kind of layouting is fully automated. Now the table scales nicely while I'm changing this application. To have some data in here, we should remember that all of this code is running on the server side. So it's quite easy to connect to your backend. For that, let's create a backend. Here I'm going to cheat and cut and paste some code, as the backends are not that interesting here. Backend class. And for the backend, just a cut and paste small backend and explain that in a bit to you. So this is a simple SQL-based backend. In real application, you will probably be using like JPA or something else, but this is just a simple backend. So we have two interesting method calls here. Get nodes container. This kind of gives the data model for us. And for it, we are using SQL container built into Vaadin. And for it, we can just say that, hey, show nodes from this nodes table. Quite trivial. And another method is just commit changes back to the database. The rest of the file is just creating a connection pool and generating random data in my database. This is an in-memory database, so I have to recreate it from scratch. So if we have a backend like this, we could just connect that to our table. Let's say notice set data source, and we get from backend data source like this. And go to our application, and poof, we have an exception. What is missing? Oh, we are missing a database driver here. Let's copy a database driver here. So what we try to do is build an application with three different parts. We just build the layout, then we wire up the layout somehow to our event handling mechanism, and then connect to backend. So the connecting to backend is as easy as connecting to a backend container. This is exactly what we did, but for some reason it didn't work. So, layouting here, we built the layout with split panel as we did in the demo, and then just compose this from ready-made layouts. So basically, in this case, there is the split panel, then there is a table on the right side of the split panel, and then I have editor component here on the right side and a save button. So these are all just stored in my UI. So we have table, editor component, and a save button, and just laid it out on the screen. Interesting thing here is that while I'm kind of scrolling through the table, it actually loads from the database while I'm scrolling. So actually, with the database cursor, it is doing another query in the database while I'm scrolling. And let's see, when I'm choosing something from the code here, it goes to my button click listener like this, and just my table volume set listener like this, and says editor set node. So just one line of code. And if I'm going to this editor component, this is actually a new component created just for this application. So it's typical in Vaadin that you are building the UI of components. In this case, I just extend custom component to build my new component. And this is quite simple. I have two different fields. This text field here, just for the title, and new rich text area for the rest of the application. Typically, like in this case, in the constructor, I just lay these out and just put these within existing layouts. So this is quite trivial component. And what is new in Vaadin 7 here is that we are, instead of using forms here, we have new field group mechanism. So basically, what we do here, we get, let's go back to the user interface side. So when we are having this value chase event, basically choosing something from the table, we go to this actually, and we call editor set node, and we get an item from a container. Basically, this table is now connected to our container, this SQL container, fetching data from the database, and we can get a row from there by saying get item, and this item is actually the ID of the item is the ID of the row in the table. So we just get the value of this nodes table and fetch this row from this. So it's just one line of code. Go back to the editor side, and here with the set node, we create a new field group out of this item. So basically, it takes this data model and says that, hey, I want to bind these in the fields on the screen. So in this case, I say that, hey, bind all these data model fields to existing components in this object. So basically, this node editor object. And then it matches these property IDs. These are the property IDs of this item. So these are basically like title item, title property and the text property. So it matches these to these fields on the screen. And that's it. So now when that was basically all the code here. So now when I'm choosing something, binding these to these fields, editing it as a foo here, saving, this actually saves it back to the database and commits. Because this is a real database, the foo should be around here somewhere. Let's sort this out. I'm just editing the first one. So it just kind of also updates on the table, and I can, let's say, change something here, save it, and that's it. So it's like really simple development model. So if you want to clone this Git repo, there is a mail and build file for it, so that you can try it out yourself. So third idea, embracing Java. So everything in Vaadin is Java. And that basically means that you can use any JVM language for building those UIs. You don't have to stick to Java, you can use Groovy, you can use Scala or Clojure or whatever is your favorite language. Now especially Scala starts to look like really good fit with Vaadin. It is really efficient to work with, and Vaadin is really efficient to work with, and when you're combining those, the code starts to be really compact. There is a nice add-on called Vaadin in Vaadin directory that adds Scala APIs on top of Vaadin. So you have like native Scala-like APIs for Vaadin with that. It runs in any web browser, i.e. Vaadin 6, the current stable version runs with even IE 6. So even really old browsers are supported. With Vaadin 7, we are supporting everything since IE 8. And of course, mobile operating systems are supported as well. You don't have to install anything, so there are no plugins, no client-side Java needed.